We are back. I am very happy to have on the Goldstein on Gelt show a former bartender, busboy, and waiter who's now become a professor at Cornell University, Mike Lynn. Mike, how you doing?
I'm fine, thank you.
So your specialty is in the study of tipping, leaving a tip. Isn't that rather an outdated practice? Wouldn't today it be more logical for people in restaurants, let's say, just to add the service charge into the overall bill?
Oh boy, you've opened a can of worms there. Well, certainly it's not outdated. The tipping's been around for a while. It doesn't look like it's going away anytime soon. So I wouldn't say it's outdated. Are there better systems? Is it better to build the price of service into menu prices at restaurants, or should you charge a service charge? Turns out those are pretty complex questions to answer. If you ask consumers in surveys, they'll tell you that they absolutely hate automatic service charges.
Oh, automatic.
And for the most part, they don't like tipping either. And if you say, should restaurants pay their staff a livable wage, they'll say yes. But if you throw in, would you be willing to pay higher menu prices for that to happen, they start saying no again.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Well, isn't that the same thing, paying a higher menu price and adding 15 or 20% as a tip?
No. If it's going to cut into the restaurant's profits, that's okay with me. I just don't want to pay it myself.
I see.
It seems to be the attitude that consumers are taking. So it's even hard to answer what consumers would prefer because they seem to have these illogical and inconsistent attitudes. And tipping has a lot of effects. I mean, I've done research that documents that tips, in fact, do motivate servers to deliver better service, especially more personalized service.
Mm-hmm.
And if you add the price of service into a menu price, it turns out consumers will, in fact, perceive a restaurant with 15% higher menu prices and no tipping as more expensive than a restaurant with the lower prices, but you're expected to tip. And that's true even if the people generally tip 20%. So in fact, the first restaurant would be the less expensive for them to eat at. But they perceive restaurant expensiveness based on the menu prices alone.
I guess people often don't see kind of the holistic picture, and they don't even necessarily think about the tip because that's not written down. Yeah,
I think that's true.
So before we go more in depth on this tipping, because I think a lot of your research has to do with waiters and waitresses and restaurants, how come that's the field that we tip in? I was driving the other day on the New Jersey Garden State Parkway and got to a toll booth, and I didn't have an easy pass, so I actually had to pay. And for the first time in my life, I thought the toll collector was just the nicest guy. He was singing as he was doing and kind of playing air drums, and I sort of felt, why don't I give this guy a tip? And we can discuss that one in particular, but how is it that restaurant servers get this, and in certain areas you get tipping, but in other areas, a salesman in a clothing store, why don't you tip him?
Good question, and there's very little research on the topic and only a couple of theories. Economists say that we tip those people for whom it's more efficient for the customer to monitor and reward performance than it is for the company to do so. So at CounterHelp, it's a fairly standardized product. The manager can see whether the order's being taken in an expeditious and accurate manner. It's easy and efficient for the company and management to monitor CounterHelp. Restaurant servers are waiting on people who are scattered throughout the restaurant. Those customers have very different wants and desires. I, for example, don't like servers to spend a lot of time talking and chatting with me. I bring my own dinner companionship with me. But other customers do like that. So a manager doesn't know whether a table is being ignored or their wishes are being granted by the server, who leaves them basically alone. it's very difficult for management under those circumstances to figure out who's doing a good job and who's not. And it's easy for the customer to say, yeah, I'm being served in the way I want. And so economists argue tipping exists because there are some circumstances where the customer can monitor and reward performance better than the employing firm.
So if you look at a tip jar, sometimes you go to the Starbucks and they have a tip jar, and frankly, there's usually not that much in it. And although I consider myself to be a very good tipper when I go to restaurants, I don't like putting a tip in that jar because I feel they didn't really serve me. They just handed me my coffee, as opposed to a waiter or waitress who, if he or she does a good job, I really feel does deserve the tip.
Yes. I mean, okay, so do we tip people as a genuine desire to help and reward service? I would say not really, because if you think about it. You just said that you went through a toll booth, and this was a pleasant person who took a drudgery kind of thing and made it lighthearted and not so bad. And you didn't tip him. Why? Because it's not normative. Regardless of the fact that, in fact, he did a small service for you.
Yeah, and I would have if people did this. I would have, thrown him an extra $1 on the way if it
had been normative.
Yeah.
Ultimately, we tip people. Mostly, we tip people because it's expected, and we don't want the disapproval that comes with violating social norms. Okay, and then the question is, why do we have the norms that we do, and why is it normative to tip restaurant waiters? Well, economists give one answer that I've already explained. Anthropologists, there's an anthropologist in California, George Foster, who believes that tipping is a way of forestalling envy, that it's natural for service workers to envy their customers, because after all, they're working and their customers are often on vacation or eating and dining, and that tipping evolved as a way for the customers to say, hey, don't envy me that I'm having a good time and you're slaving away. Here's some money. Go have a drink on me later. And in fact, the word for tip in many languages around the world does translate to drink money, tea money, money for drink, and that sort of thing.
No kidding. We are talking with Mike Lynn, who is a professor at Cornell University's School of Hotel Administration. He's done a huge amount of work and research about tipping. Maybe you've even seen his work. It's been covered from the New York Times to the Wall Street Journal and, quite frankly, around the world. Mike, you touched on something which I often feel, which is a little guilty. In the same way if you go to even something more personal than a restaurant would be, let's say you go to a masseuse, where they're really working on just making your back feel better. And I feel guilty, frankly. Is that the correct emotion to feel?
Who's to say? I'm not in the, that business. But I'm like you. I feel uncomfortable sometimes being served by people. And do I believe that I might tip as a way to kind of relieve some of the guilt and the uncomfortableness? Maybe, yeah.
All right. So let's talk about a practical application of your research, which is nuts and bolts. You show up at a restaurant. How much should you tip?
In the United States, 15 to 20% of the bill.
And does that depend on the service or anything else, or is that just kind of a given?
Well, you're supposed where you tip within that 15 to 20% should be dependent on service, but you should always tip at least 15% in the United States.
And do waiters and waitresses actually calculate, well, he tipped me 14 or 17.5, or do they just pick it up off the table and move on?
I think that what they do is they know what 15 and 20% is, and they say, oh, he tipped me on the generous side or on the stingy side. They don't calculate the exact percentage, but they'll know if it's less than 15%, or they'll know if it's closer to 20%. And they'll have an emotional reaction, of course.
And do you think that that's a way to, I don't know if it's even appropriate, maybe it's patronizing, but let's say you get crummy service and you want to teach them a lesson. Will they say, well, he only gave 15, or he only gave 5, or nothing? and say, I guess I did a bad job, or do you think that the servers don't really pick up on that?
It's, I think first off, it's difficult. It's difficult for servers to know themselves whether they've done a good job or not. I waited tables to pay my way through school, and I tried collecting data on my own customers, and among other things, I tried to rate the quality of my own service to see if my perceptions of service quality predicted tips. And it turns out I had a hard time judging. I was pretty, I basically did a decent job. And it was very, very rare that something extraordinary happened. I go, oh, that was outstanding service. But never did I give really horrible service either. So I think that most service is, in the United States, good, not great, but good, and doesn't vary a lot, and it's hard for servers to know themselves whether they've given good service or not, which makes it hard for them to see, is there a relationship between the tips I get and the service I deliver. Mm-hmm. They do see that there are vast differences between customers and tip amounts. So if a server gets a small tip, I think they're far more likely to attribute it to the characteristics of the customer than to their own service.
Mm-hmm. Maybe when we go to restaurants, we should carry our own survey card and hand it to the waiter along with the tip and say, you got an A+, so I give you 20%.
If you want, you could do that, yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes I just feel as though no one really cares what I ultimately think, and they're just assuming that because it's the norm to give a tip, that that's just what
mm-hmm.
they're going to get. Interesting. All right, we're nearing the end, but I just want to ask you a question. What got you into study this specific field of economics?
Boy, a couple of things. First, I paid my way through school waiting tables, and I noticed that there were a lot of other servers who were making more money than me, and I didn't think they were better servers, so I was just kind of curious what's going on. And it turns out that what was going on is they were better at establishing rapport with the customer than I was. I put all of my energies into technical aspects of service and not the social ones. Mm-hmm. But it's the social dimension that's most important for getting a tip.
So if you were advising a waiter on one thing he could do tonight to increase his tips, what would you suggest?
Establish a rapport with that customer. How do you do that? Introduce yourself by name, smile a lot, squat down next to the table, touch them on the arm. If you happen to know their name because they give you a credit card, thank them by name when you deliver the check. Whatever you can to establish some social connection with them.
That sounds like very good advice for all of our listeners to understand what their waiters are doing, and for all of the waiters listening to the Goldstein on Gelt show, take it to heart. Mike, we're just about out of time now, but in the last few seconds, could you just tell people how could they learn more about your work?
I have a website, tippingresearch.com. Tipping Research, all one word. And if they Google that, they'll find it.
All right. Mike Lynn from Cornell University, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Doug's weekly radio show is heard around the world, but if you miss it, you can download the podcast at www.goldsteinongelt.com. The Goldstein on Gelt show gives you up-to-date financial ideas so you can get on the path to financial freedom. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, send Doug an email to doug@profile-financial.com. It's your money for your future, so join Doug every week to build your wealth on the Goldstein on Gelt show.